Well, welcome to this edition of the 700 Club. 10 feet of snow in the Sierras, unbelievable what's going on. Is Tim Tebow going to get married soon, but right after he plays movie producer? And on top of all that, this lovely lady is back with us from the Serengeti.
Yes,
Wendy,
sir.
it's good to see you.
Great to be back. Great to be back.
How is being married?
My first show as a married woman.
The first. Are you happy? Is it a good thing?
It's 2 weeks in, no complaints. It's
no
fantastic.
Complaints. Well, let's hope.
I highly recommend marriage.
All right. And your new name is no longer
Well, I'm keeping Wendy Griffith. I've been Wendy Griffith for a long time.
Oh, you keep on being.
But,
all right. Well,
yeah.
that's her stage name.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, she'll be telling us more about it. I think we've got some pictures, don't we?
We do. And Pat, I just want to thank you so much for coming to the wedding. And there's my dad walking me down the aisle, and there you are. And Pat, you gave a wonderful blessing to me and Bill. We will never forget it. There you are, blessing us. That's the official kiss after the ceremony.
It was one of the most dramatic kisses I've ever seen in all of my life.
Really?
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, that's because the preacher sort of like, he was really funny about that.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going back to the kiss. Okay.
Yeah, it was okay. Well, and there
we are at the reception at the beautiful Homestead Resort in Hot Springs, Virginia. And then
look at that.
And you can't tell how cold it is outside because we ran up the hill, and I had like a lot of twigs and leaves in my veil, but it was worth getting that shot right there.
Well, so. It was beautiful. It was a glorious experience, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you so much. I think that we wanted to. Did you want to show that? Okay. So we went to the Serengeti, right?
Yeah.
And so and Bill is a hunter, and he spotted. We came up on 7 lions that he saw just laying, and that's one of the tented camps, and there they are, just napping. And like you said, as long as you stay in the Jeep, they'll leave you alone. They'll leave you alone, and you can get pretty close. And that was a pretty exciting opportunity for us to happen upon them.
Well, what a wonderful experience.
But it's good to be back.
Well, I'm glad you are. We missed you, and I know the thousands of men across the country are sad that you're no longer on the market, but I'm sure Bill he's a nice guy.
Thank you. Yeah,
it was
really
fun being with you. Well, anyhow, let's get on to the news. From the sublime to the ridiculous, North Korea is one of the most dangerous places on earth. Tens of thousands rot in prison camps, and millions starve while the regime pursues a nuclear arsenal. And still, President Trump believes he can bring change to that rogue nation.
The president is hoping to convince Kim Jong-un to get rid of his nukes and embrace economic freedom. Charlene Aaron reports on the Hanoi Summit.
The second summit between President Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un is underway in Hanoi. Today, the president and Kim Jong-un met for a brief one-on-one meeting, followed by a small private dinner. Formal meetings are set for Thursday.
But I thought the first summit was a great success, and I think this one hopefully will be equal or greater than the first. And we made a lot of progress, and I think the biggest progress was our relationship is really a good one.
In a meeting with Vietnam's Prime Minister, President Trump noted that Vietnam's economic success shows what can happen when a communist country opens up to the world.
We both felt very good about having this very important summit in Vietnam because you really are an example as to what can happen with good thinking.
He says North Korea would benefit economically if it gives up its nuclear weapons, tweeting, North Korea would be the same and very quickly if it would denuclearize. The potential is awesome. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un is seeking relief from economic sanctions, and observers say it's important that the two come away from Hanoi with solid agreements and concrete steps.
We need to have North Korea take the first steps to convince us that they've changed their behavior, that they're willing to come into compliance with what the international community has directed them to do.
Despite the president's urging, it's not clear if Kim Jong-un really wants to join the world community by getting rid of his nuclear arsenal and embracing economic reform, or what agreements Mr. Trump will carry home from Hanoi. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, let's hope the president, he's a pretty good negotiator, but those Koreans are pretty, well, they've been stonewalling for years, and whether our director of national security has said that, in her opinion, they're not going to give up nukes. So we'll see. Well, the president's former attorney is doing something that should never be done. There's a sanctity in the attorney-client privilege that is not supposed to be breached. Well, Michael Cohen, they're calling him the rat, and he's turning on his former client, and he's going to testify about all the terrible things that he claims that Trump did. John Jessup has more on that.
Thanks, Pat. In public testimony before Congress today, Michael Cohen, Mr. Trump's former fixer and personal attorney, reportedly will accuse the president of criminal conduct while in office. Those alleged actions related to reimbursements for payments made to a porn star in exchange for her silence about an affair during the 2016 campaign, a potential violation of campaign finance laws. According to testimony released to the media before the hearing, Cohen says the president directed him to make the payments and paid him back over a period of several months after he took office. Cohen is also expected to testify that the president had prior knowledge of the WikiLeaks mail dump that hurt Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. But he admits he does not have any proof the campaign colluded with Russia. Cohen has admitted to lying to Congress in former testimony about Trump's business dealings with Russia. The president says he's not worried about Cohen's testimony, tweeting this morning that his former attorney is lying to reduce his prison time. Well, following the Senate defeat of a measure designed to protect the survivors of abortion, members of the House are vowing to fight every day to stop infanticide after Democrats blocked the bill from coming to a vote. Washington correspondent Paul Strand has the strong reaction from members of Congress.
One of those congressmen worked as an obstetrician before becoming a lawmaker.
I could have never in my wildest, worst nightmare have dreamed that I would have to come up here one day and fight harder to protect newborn babies than I did as a physician.
Representative Chris Smith, leader of the House Pro-Life Caucus, says it's unconscionable abortionists are being allowed to take this deadly step when an abortion fails.
They know the unborn child dies when they dismember or chemically poison, but when they survive, they take that next step and they make no effort whatsoever to protect this breathing, gasping, often crying little baby, and that's murder.
Mallory Quigley of the Susan B. Anthony list had poll results that could lead to a political change of heart for those fighting this legislation.
77% of Americans support the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Only 9% oppose.
Meanwhile, Senate Democrats aren't even close to apologizing for their vote against the Born Alive Act. Their leader, Senator Chuck Schumer, labeled the bill Washington politics at its worst.
So this vote does not occur in a vacuum. It's part of a pattern taken by President Trump and congressional Republicans to limit, deny, or circumscribe a woman's right to health care.
Senator Tina Smith treated it like an assault on doctors and women.
This bill intimidates providers and forces physicians to provide inappropriate medical treatment, even when it's not in the best interests of the patient or her family.
Patrina Mosley of the Family Research Council would like to give one message to women contemplating abortion.
Have you heard of adoption? There's plenty of families out there who want children, who can't have them. And that is a life that is worth saving, that someone else wants. And that's okay if you don't, but someone else does, and that baby deserves to live for that family who's going to love them.
No one knows how far across the nation this move to legalize what some are calling after-birth abortions is going to go. But there's this. The American public seems so shocked by these developments, it's likely to become a big issue in the 2020 elections. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Paul. Pat, back to you.
Folks, there's no way under heaven you can justify this as having anything to do with a woman's health. It has nothing to do with a woman's right of reproduction. It has nothing to do with any of that nonsense that's being put out by Chuck Schumer and his buddies. When there's a botched abortion and a baby is born, the governor of Virginia, who is himself an obstetrician, said, well, we'll keep the baby comfortable until we decide what to do with it, and the idea was we would kill it. And that has nothing to do with a woman's health. The woman has delivered the baby is born after a botched abortion, and then the question is, will that baby be left alive or will it be killed? And that is known as infanticide. There is no way around it. And for the life of me, I can't understand what's going on in the minds of Democrats. You want to go into the election saying, we favor infanticide. That's worse than Adolf Hitler. John.
Pat, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise is one of those fighting to protect abortion survivors. He's also supporting the president's declaration of a national emergency to build a border wall. Tuesday, the Democrat-controlled House passed a historic resolution blocking that declaration. Recently, Representative Scalise spoke with CBN's Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson about that emergency declaration, the abortion survivors bill, and more.
House Minority Whip Steve Scalise joins many other Republican lawmakers standing behind the president's national emergency declaration and tells CBN News he doesn't know how anyone can look at the border situation and deny there's a major problem.
This is clearly one of those cases where the president can declare an emergency, and he has, because there is a crisis at the border, and he's working to keep our country safe.
Scalise is also calling out Democrats, who he says didn't object when former President Barack Obama used executive orders to put his policies in place.
Democrats were silent there, but all of a sudden when it comes to the national security of this country, which is a constitutional responsibility of the president to keep our country safe, when the president's standing up and taking legal action to do it, now all of a sudden they're wondering if it's allowed. The law actually does allow it. The law goes back to 1976, and it's been used dozens of times.
Scalise is also trying to bring the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act to the House floor. A similar bill already failed in the Senate this week, as all but 3 Democrats voted against it.
What we're trying to do is put legal protection in place that most people are shocked to find out doesn't already exist in law.
He needs 218 signatures in order to get a vote, a hard number to come by in the Democrat-controlled House.
You find that so many Democrats are afraid to buck Nancy Pelosi. But again, on this issue, I don't understand how you can allow a baby to be born alive and then let it be murdered and think that that should be legal anywhere.
While this bill is unlikely to make it to the president, Republicans want Democrats on the record regarding this issue heading into the 2020 campaign.
This is an issue that even most people who identify themselves as being pro-choice think it's wrong to kill the baby after it's born alive. So this shouldn't be even part of the abortion debate. This should be a protection that's guaranteed everybody in America.
Scalise also told CBN News about getting involved in Wednesday's Supreme Court arguments on the Bladensburg Peace Cross.
This case has real serious implications on grave sites all across this country. If you look at what they're trying to do, they're trying to say that you can't display a cross on a grave site.
He fears the ruling could eventually determine whether religious symbols will be permitted on headstones in military cemeteries on public land.
Go to Arlington Cemetery, go to any military cemetery, and you see whether it's Star of David or a cross, people that want to be buried and have a religious symbol affixed to their headstone. But ultimately, if we don't get the right ruling from the Supreme Court, it could put at jeopardy all of our cemeteries like Arlington. So it's got a lot of national implications.
The justices could ultimately rule on just this case or ones that are very similar, or issue a broader decision that determines when religious symbols are allowed in the public sphere. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Big implications indeed. Thanks, Abby. Pat, back to you.
You know, this lemon case, it was the idea that the Congress government couldn't advance or withstand religion. And Justice Scalia, when he was here, said, look, this is like a ghoul that has risen from the grave, and it's time that we drive a stake through its heart. The justices now have a chance to overrule the insanity of the Lemon decision. It was something that was wrongly decided, and it has put us on a collision course with, you know, what was said before by William O. Douglas. We are a religious people whose institutions presuppose the existence of a supreme being, and to have some kind of a arbitrary ruling that this kind of display cannot be done on a public forum, that there can't be a cross because that is a Christian symbol. As somebody said, you know, every telephone pole has got a cross on it. You're going to cut down all the poles all across the country? Is that what you're going to do? I mean, because that's a religious symbol. They're all crosses. Cut them all down. I'm sure we'll want the government to do that too. John?
Well, Pat, an atmospheric river is triggering heavy snow and rain in Northern California. It's a phenomenon similar to a hurricane, bringing with it torrential rain, and it's producing record-shattering snow in the Sierra Mountains. 40 inches fell in 24 hours at Donner Pass. The combination of heavy snow and high winds shut down Interstate 80. Rain also soaked lower elevations of Northern California, triggering flooding and, Pat, landslides.
Well, you're talking about 8 to 10 feet of snow. And when that stuff begins to melt, heaven help Southern California. They don't have the necessary runoff facilities. They don't have the necessary reservoirs. And it's going to be a tragedy. It's coming down. When you have 10 feet of snow in a short period of time, and that begins to melt, it isn't that they're not going to any longer having a drought. They're going to have flooding of epic proportions. And there are many places, for example, like Sacramento, if those dams and those levees in Sacramento burst, the whole town will be underwater. And down the river, we've talked about some of the Whittier River and some of those other things that might break under the influence of this enormous amount of water. But they've been praying for rain up there. They're sure getting their prayers answered.